Hello, it's What the Doodle here, and in today's session, we're going to have a look at this article called The Anatomy of a 2 a.m. Mental Breakdown. And it says essentially this is a war story, and of course, as professionals, we've all had to deal with some crazy outage or production issue, and it is something that drives a lot of stress and anxiety through the roof. And I do enjoy a good war story because it isn't so much about having production issues. We will always have them. It is about how we react to them and what we can learn from them. So let's go through it. Around 2 a.m. this morning, I had realization that this was the most stressed I have been. On the verge I have ever been, on the verge of a complete breakdown. Why? Because I noticed around 10 p.m. that jumpcomedy.com was entirely broken with all the HTTP post calls made by RTQ query failing. Nothing worked, and though I had deployed recent changes, none of them would cause this. I was at a complete loss as to where to look, especially as this was working locally. Posting on the usual Discords, Next.js, Vericel, is leading to dead silence. I'm alone and I have to fix this issue, which I didn't cause. This isn't the first production defect I've introduced in my 25 years of working. Now it is interesting where he's mentioning or this person is mentioning that this isn't the first time that they have introduced a defect, because that is almost always the natural assumption, is that it is something you've caused in order to create the issue in production. Of course, that is always a good sign, because we should always assume that we've caused an issue. That may not be the case. Of course, it's not easy to be so clear-headed when things are going wrong and falling apart. But so of course, yes. But this is the first one where I had absolutely nobody to turn to in the time of crisis, while customer complaints are piling up at a rate never seen before. Okay, so obviously everybody's journey is different, and I can completely sort of understand when you have very large teams. Of course, there will always be somebody to help out, and but I have been in this situation where there isn't anybody higher to turn to, essentially. So I know absolutely exactly how stressful this is when, if you're responsible for a large system or a business critical system, and there you are the actual expert, there is no other expert to turn to. So I absolutely know the feeling when a situation like this happens, and it is horrible. It is absolutely horrid, because there is literally no one else. The entire company depends on your shoulders, and that is a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. So of course, it's for this reason that throughout your career you tend to become very defensive in the approach of your system design, and you have to be, because of course nobody wants to be in this situation. And of course, every different vertical in terms of technology has a different knock-on effects in terms of the outcome, in terms of what is the seriousness of it. For example, if you're working in fintech, of course, this will, the outcome could be a huge amount of loss in terms of financial loss. If you're working in the meditech, that could be even more serious. You could have potentially people's lives on the line that could be affected. So anyway, let's carry on. With no production support, no SRE, no senior engineers, no manager to make it go away, nothing. So of course, this seems like this individual is a sort of a medium, medium to possibly not a senior by the sounds of this. So it's interesting why there was no seniors on here. So I don't know the structure. I don't know the makeup. I don't know why that wasn't the case, and why everything was upon the shoulder of this particular individual. I don't know. Again, there's a lot of context missing here. So it is a war story with a lot of context. But let's carry on unpacking. And here's the worst part: people who have taken a chance on me to the point where their entire small business depends on me are sad. Okay, that's worrying. That's very worrying. So so essentially, it looks like people who have come to take a chance on me to the point where their entire small business. So that probably makes a little bit more sense. So this company is very small, and of course, when you have a small company or startups, then what tends to happen is that you have fewer people. You have vastly smaller teams. When you have those smaller teams, each individual has to take on far more responsibilities. They have to wear a lot of hats, and that is not good. It's not a good situation. It's not healthy. You can do it for a short while, but you will burn out quite quickly doing that. So let's carry on. Not only do I have no idea how to fix this, I'm also hurting people. This absolutely sucks. I felt shame, sorrow, and incompetence. Yeah, that's understandable. That's pretty much how you feel at the time. And the incompetence and the imposter syndrome that comes with it. Yeah, I think that's generally how we feel like. We feel like, number one, we're responsible, because obviously that's the fair assumption that we've done something to break the production system, but also the fact that, we must be complete idiots. How do we allow this to happen? Of course, it's not always clear cut, but at the time, yeah, you will be feeling a lot of these emotions. This is absolutely correct. The thoughts were crossing my mind were bizarre. Do I just shut down this business down? Do I send a mass apology email to my customers and just ask them to pick a different event management provider? What do I do? Because I don't know where to look, and it's been 4 hours already. Yeah, I guess the stress levels, the longer it goes on, the more stressful it becomes. Because especially in this case, yeah, he does not have somebody to turn to in this situation. And of course, this isn't the case in a larger team. There would be teams of people, and of course, when you have lots of hands working at the problem, it can help, absolutely. But if you're just by yourself, then the anxiety, as it goes longer and longer, will keep mounting and it keep on doubling up. Enter Eminem. All right, calm down, relax, start breathing. I started breathing, but it didn't help a damn, as I still don't know what the issue was. No matter how many console log statements I sprinkled around, nothing made sense. Why? Was it the headers, the length of the API token, the sequence of the calls? But it was just working. Why is this happening? And why are get and delete calls working? It's okay. The world won't end. So what if the business entirely fails and you're paraded at the next tech conference as a case of what not to do? Oh well, that's your destiny. Just deal with it. But right now, no deal with this goddamn. No, but right now, deal with the goddamn bug that you didn't cause but have to suffer through. The only clue I have is that it's working, that it is working on localhost, which reminded me of the old joke where during a production outage the junior developer tells his boss, but it's working on my machine. Well, buddy, you're the junior developer. Also, you're a sack of feces. No. Don't go there. There's plenty of time for self-reflection and self-hate later. But right now, just see why these cursed post calls are failing with type error, fail to execute fetch on window with a request object that has already been used. Now, that error message is a complete red herring and tells me nothing. It may as well have said the Lannisters refused to pay the debts and flight UA763 from Miami is delayed. Ha ha. I start making jokes to add some levity to the situation. It's not so bad. Life is about nature and trees, and sooner this business shuts down and you take a boat to a deserted island, the sooner you can start your memoirs, and the first chapter of the memoir would be type error, failed to execute fetch. My wife, oh my poor wife, she offered me a cup of tea and ruffled my hair. It's okay, big companies have production outages too. Oh, that's sweet of her. I told her to go to bed while I questioned my major life decisions leading up to this moment. Oh, what's this? It's customers' emails piling up in my box. Lovely. Hey Zara, I can't exchange the price of my event. Hi Zara, I'm trying to remove a promo code and it won't let me. Please can I just delete my email at this point and take a bus to the Northern Wilderness, because I still have no clue what's going on, and now I'm thinking maybe I should take that break to clear my head, like they say in those self-help books. But they don't say is that every 5 minutes I'm getting an email saying something's broken, and my response is basically I apologize, working on it. So yeah, of course, in these situations, this is one of the major problems, is actually dealing with customers. And of course, again, it goes back to having a larger team. Normally you would have a separate team dealing with this, so you'd have a series of almost like an IT help desk, and you'd have entire teams doing PR and sort of damage limitation and that kind of stuff. And so of course, this is a small business, and when it's a small business, these effects are pronounced. They're because it's essentially one individual trying to do everything. And at this point, you just have to switch off your email and your notifications, because they're going to essentially, that the whole thing's fallen over. There's going to be angry customers or whatnot and users, and it does not help in terms of focus, because you have to be methodical around this. And it's interesting that he was saying that he was running it locally, and it, locally he couldn't replicate it, and that's a huge problem, because when you have this issue in production, you need to sort of narrow it down. And he, of course, it does look like he was doing that, but of course, he was juggling lots of things. He's he's obviously, at one point, he's having to handle all of the live customers who are complaining and getting irate and whatnot, and at the same time, he's trying to sort of hone in on what's actually causing the issue. So let's carry on. Um, but I'm not working on it. I'm just staring at the screen, putting debug statements where I feel the Chrome inspector saying, "Bro, are you serious? You think there's a bug on this line?" So yeah, this when you're under pressure, sometimes you will have a spattergun approach, and it's easy to say. It's easy to sit here as sort of an armchair kind of debugger, and to say, "Oh yes, you have to do it step in a very methodical step." Of course, that's easy to say when you're not under pressure, but under pressure you can't think straight. You cannot think straight, and you'll start panicking, and you will start doing all sorts of random spattergun approach of putting effectively printf debugging. And it doesn't help that this is obviously client, where the issue seems to be happening is client side code, most probably in JavaScript, and of course JavaScript is dynamically typed, and these are the issues with dynamically typed languages. It's not to say that statically typed languages don't have runtime errors. They do, but they have them far, far less, because the compiler stops the vast majority of a lot of the runtime errors are stopped at compile time. That's and the safer language that you have, for example Rust, they become that surface area of potential runtime errors becomes dramatically smaller. But with a dynamic language, all bets are off, because it's everything. Well, so many things will fail at runtime. It's amazing that anything actually even works. So anyway, what's this? A Chrome update came today. Could that have caused it? I hope. I see hope. Dashed. Hope is dashed. This is reproducible in Firefox and Edge. Even Edge, like what? Back to console.log and breakpoints. Now I'm dealing with source maps and libraries that don't publish source maps. So now I'm looking at code that looks like this. This is not good. Let me just try reverting from a version from a month ago. Nothing. 3 months ago. Nothing. Still failing. A year ago. Zilch. Okay, so you re-ask the question: what's happening in production that's happening? What's happening in production that's happening locally, or vice versa? Some candidates. Sentry is disabled locally. Databases are pointing to Docker instead of cloud providers. Cloudflare's proxies. Got rid of Sentry in production, nothing. Pointed to prod databases locally, nothing. So this is clever. So this is, the idea I mentioned about methodically going through. So obviously this individual is trying to replicate this issue locally, and obviously had some sort of red herrings in terms of thinking maybe it's a browser compatibility issue because it was an update, but obviously that clearly wasn't the case because he tested it in different browsers that didn't work. And now what he's doing, and this, I would have argued this should have been the first port of call, is to say, okay, we need to replicate this locally, but what are the differences between local and production? And there will always be, for example, the database would be the big one, but obviously there are certain things that we only enable in production that we do not enable in local or development. And that's essentially what he did. He essentially almost had a checklist of differences, and he started essentially removing each of those equations, each of those differences, if you like. So he goes through. Makes no difference. Maybe I should take that break, if only to calculate the financial damage and and much more significant reputational damage. What else is difference? Maybe post hoc. I have the API key blanked out locally to reduce cost. So let me just add it to see what gives. Shot in the dark, 1 in a million chance. Let's do it. What? Reproduce on localhost? Give me that effing cup of tea now. Next commit. Take post hoc, and everything is working. So at this point, I'm thinking all the people I've recommended post hoc to as this amazing tool which shows you what your users are experiencing. How naive was I? How naive I was. Right now, I hate post hoc more than anything, and can't believe I was about to pay for that product. Still a good product. I'm overreacting here, but still, in the moment, I wanted to burn the company down. But I feel good about finding the defect, because soon after, many people reported the same. So that was my night. So okay, he essentially solved, or this individual solved it in the end, and it was because of some third party integration that had the defect. But because this is JavaScript, this is the thing. It's all dynamically typed, and it's all, and it was obviously an update that this particular third party had done, which had caused then a cascade in terms of errors, which then clobbered and then sort of broke the rest of the site. And that's absolutely horrendous. That is absolutely horrendous. And so, of course, this this issue was nothing to do with this particular developer. This developer slash engineer had nothing to do with this failure. It was a failure of a third party, and of course, that failure would have a knock-on effect on, I presume, so many other websites who are also using this third party. So sometimes you could have the best code, for example, or you could have all of the unit tests and everything, and still be some other third party or some other balked integration, or not balked integration, but some other defects can have such a cascading effect. And again, yeah, this is the, unfortunately, I would say this points to bigger issues around, like, dynamically typed languages, client side, the fact that we have such complex single page applications that can be vulnerable to this. So the fact that you have essentially third party code that can break your entire site, that is actually quite scary. And this is why you should absolutely try and reduce that surface of unknown, if you like. Of course, that's you can't get away from third party sort of libraries and tools and services. They are, of course, needed, but every single time you take on a potential risk, and yeah, it's a difficult one. And of course, what could he have done differently? I think obviously, number one, of course, having a bigger team will help massively. And the other thing is, of course, when situations like this arise, having a bigger team would mean that you can delegate some of those responsibilities in a situation like this, because you will have situations like this. And they're unavoidable. Systems break all the time because systems don't work in isolation. They work in a connected fashion. And when you have a lot of systems that are interconnected, interdependent, a failure in one can cascade, and that is exactly what's happened here. This should not have happened. I would say, again, if you've got a third party piece of kit, Java, or I guess it was a JavaScript piece of kit, the fact that it failed and cascaded and brought down the entire site, that's just absolutely terrible code from this post-hoc company. They shouldn't do that. But yeah, that is one of the dangers. And the fact that one of the hint was when this individual was looking at past versions, and that's another thing that we tend to do. That's also a good call as well. Oftentimes, and normally you'll see these things are related, though, if you push, and it's to do with the timing. So for example, if you've pushed up a very recent update and then suddenly you get issues, the best thing to do is roll back, because you roll back to a known state, if you like, in terms of the code base. You know that the previous version was stable, unless the previous version was buggy or had some serious bug. Of course, then you might have to roll even further back. So yeah, these things are hugely. I mean, I appreciate this individual saying that he nearly had a mental breakdown. It can feel like that. It absolutely can feel like that, especially if you have no help. But yeah, you have to try and remain calm in this situation, and it's very easy to say, of course, not very difficult to do in real life, but you have to take things systematically. So you have to break down the problem. You have to try and figure out what the difference between the local environment and the production environment, to see what are those differences, because it will be especially if you can't replicate it locally, then it means it's in the differences. And as he found out, because he started listing those things down. Of course, early on he was panicking and he was doing essentially console.log and splattergunning everywhere. That was more of because he was absolutely not knowing where this was happening. So he had to kind of narrow that down. And then obviously he was looking at different browsers because this was clearly something happening on the front end. And then he narrowed it down further by looking at the differences between local and production. And eventually he narrowed it completely down to this third-party service, whatever. That was the actual culprit. And of course that issue looks like whoever's using that would have had a similar issue. Fetch broken on August the 19th, type error. Yeah, look at this type error. Look at that. Absolutely horrible. Because this is, if you had on a static language, this would never happen. In a statically compiled language, this would be caught during compilation, not at runtime. And until we start moving away on the client side, maybe when WASM gets a GC and everything, then finally we can take a lot of these languages like Java, C Sharp, or Rust, or any or F Sharp or whatever. We can take all of these languages, statically typed languages, and compile our front end, with a proper compiler, with warnings and all that kind of stuff, with proper types and everything. And we can start getting away from this horrible, these situations, because these will keep happening. This is not the first time, certainly not the last time, and it will keep on happening. So anyway, that is all. That's my take on this. Yeah, you do not want to be in this situation, but the best you can do is learn from it and try and improve the next time, really. Okay, until the next time, I'll see you on the next one.